Hi, and welcome to the MCB Community Update. My name's Eric Joseph. I'm the Executive Director of the Audible Local Ledger, located in beautiful Mashpee, Massachusetts. It's part of the Massachusetts Audio Information Network, Maine, your main source for accessible community news and information. We bring local news and information to the blind and print disabled across the state. As part of this podcast, we'll interview the Commissioner, John Oliveira, of the Mass Commission for the Blind, quarterly. And in the intervening months, we'll bring experts who have a lot to offer to our community. And we'll listen to what they have to say, we'll ask them some probing questions, and hopefully we'll all learn together. We welcome your feedback and hope you enjoy our series of interviews. And now, without further ado, here is the MCB Community Update. Good morning. Our guest this month on MCB Community Update is Social Rehabilitation Counselor for MCB Region 5, Antony DelMonte. There are 6 regions in the state that have directors, and Region 5 is the southeastern portion of Massachusetts. It encompasses the Cape, the Islands, and the South Coast. Welcome, Tony. How are you this morning?
Good. How are you doing, Eric?
I'm great. Thanks for joining us. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your work history, how you came to MCB, and have you always been involved with state agencies or assisting people who are disabled in some manner? Is there a personal thing about this, or is it just always been your career?
Yeah, I guess it's been a part of my life and my career. My first experience was with my brother, who's autistic, and we grew up in the 60s and 70s when a lot wasn't known about autism. So that kind of gave me the idea that there are people that see the world differently, and I kind of took that on and the need to sort of help people with certain vulnerabilities. So I've done, working for the Department of Social Services. I've worked for the Department of Youth Services for a little while. I've worked in group homes. I've worked for the YMCA, and I've also taught English as a second language for a number of years. So I've worked with people with a lot of different challenges, and I came to MCB from working in the New Bedford area after working at a program that helped people find work that were immigrants or needed to graduate high school, that sort of thing. So I had little experience working with people who were legally blind, but I've learned a lot in the 19 years that I've been with MCB and met some absolutely fascinating people.
I bet you have. Did you go to school for this? Was there any training you had before you decided to make this your career?
Actually, not really. I was an international studies major at Stonehill College, and I took a lot of classes in sociology, and I found out during the time that I was studying that it was something I enjoyed. And I've always worked, since the time I was 17, and many times I ended up working human services jobs. So I just sort of learned a lot through life experience, from training and meeting people and that sort of thing.
Sounds like it happened really naturally, like for
It
you.
did. Yeah, it did. It happened organically. You're right.
Well, that's helped a lot of other people because you were influenced that way. So thank you for all the work that you have done. You don't hear that all the time. It's nice to always, get a thank you from someone who appreciates the fact that people will give their lives and their vocations to helping others. It's wonderful. We're focusing on social rehabilitation this month in particular, and obviously this plays a critical part in easing that transition into low vision or blindness for MCB consumers. So maybe you could outline for us just a little bit about the services that are offered and the process that a person would go through to receive that training and those services.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting thing because it's such a small community, but it affects so many people that don't know about each other. Or people in the community are often aren't aware of people who are blind. It's something foreign to them. So anybody that comes to us has to be referred by their ophthalmologist, who examines them and finds that their vision is either 20/200 or less, or if they have a visual field of less than 10 degrees. So I always tell folks it's kind of like if I could see something 200 feet away, you'd have to be 20 feet away to see the same thing. So many people are visually impaired, but not legally blind. So when they are registered by their eye doctor, we get a referral to our office. I generally work with people who are 65 or older, but sometimes I get folks who are not working, who are, not in going to school and that sort of thing. And what we do is I will get that referral from the eye doctor. It goes to our regional director, to my supervisor, and then I engage people. I call them and explain them that I've gotten a report from their eye doctor. And I think the way that we approach that is very, very important because particularly so many elder folks are overwhelmed by phone calls and telemarketing and that sort of thing. So I make sure that when I call folks, I tell them that I got their name from the eye doctor. And I also check to see if the eye doctor has made them aware, because hearing the word that you're blind is a very powerful thing for many people and families. And it can leave people pretty distraught. It can be kind of a shocking thing. So I try to just explain that we're doing a couple of things. One is we're trying to keep you as independent as you can be. That I explain that we see people in all kinds of settings, and independence means different things to different people. And then I make an appointment to come see them at their home, and I tell them that we'll go through the benefits and services that are available to you, and how they can keep you as independent as you possibly can be. So I try to take a positive standpoint about not what you can't do, but what you can do. And I try to be sensitive to the fact that it's a profound diagnosis, and not everybody goes through the process of accepting it very quickly. And sometimes that takes time. Sometimes it takes several visits to get people to sort of accept things. So the benefits are basically things like we send a certificate of blindness to folks to register them, let them know that they're legally blind. That allows them to get an abatement on their property, their home, or also on their motor vehicle. I explained that they're eligible for a large print telephone through the Mass EDP, the Equipment Distribution Program in Middleborough, that provides them with a phone that'll be easier to use and see the buttons and that sort of thing. I go through that detail. I explain they're eligible for a handicap placard, so that if someone drives them somewhere, they can park in a space, which often comes in handy during the winter when people have to walk long distances across the parking lot, that sort of thing. I also explain about how they can get books on tape from the Perkins School from the Blind if they've missed, misreading and aren't able to do that right now. It's a great service because I explain that it comes to the home and the machine is wonderful. It's easy to use. All of the keys talk, the buttons talk. It's all done through the mail. So I try to, explain that to them in a little bit of detail, see if they're, willing to try that. And I take the approach that everything is voluntary, so that, they can take a chance on something. If they don't like it, they can, send it back and that sort of thing. And they can get an ID card from the Commission for the Blind that takes the place of their driver's license. And sometimes that comes in handy because, I had a gentleman who was going to the bank and didn't have a driver's license. And he had the Commission for the Blind ID card, but the person had a hard time accepting it. But the Americans with Disabilities Act is written on the back of the ID that says anybody who has to accept a driver's license would accept a Commission for the Blind ID. So sometimes I have to call the bank or educate, people in the community on how the ID works and that the person is legally blind. So, and then I talk about the services. I also talk about how I work as part of a team. So there are other people that I work with. So I'll hand somebody my large print business card, and I have one here. It always draws a laugh, which is great. But the funny thing is, the reaction I get when I hand that to somebody legally blind is like, "Wow, I can see that." And then, the rest of the family goes, "Hey, that's pretty cool." And I always tell people, you want to put that on your refrigerator because I'm your case manager, and I'm your main point of contact. And I give them the card to see how much of it they can read, and then I explain there are three things that are important when you lose your vision. One is magnification. Obviously, the bigger, the better. The second is lighting. The more light you put on it, the better, usually. And the third is contrast. So I explained that that business card, has good contrast. It's large print, and I talked to them about the effectiveness of lighting, and that sort of introduces the other services that we offer, like rehabilitation teaching, where someone would come to the home and work with those three things to try to enable them to be more independent. I also talk about orientation and mobility training, where someone would teach them how to walk safely. Not everybody's ready to accept a cane. It's very early in the process, but I explain the benefits of it, from making people in the community aware that you can't see them, so that they'll drive more safely around you and you'll feel more protected. There are some people who, go to the store with family and they're bumping into other people, or it becomes embarrassing or uncomfortable. And I explain to them that having the cane lets other people be aware that you do have that disability, so they're more aware of what's happening, because you can't recognize somebody who's blind just from looking at them, and that's one of the biggest frustrations of folks who are blind themselves. But I also talk about, how people use an extension cane to, walk around the community or go to the market, and how I have folks who are legally blind that are able to take a bus and go to the store and do their own shopping. So I talk about, people that I've met who are legally blind and the things that they can do. And I try to answer any questions they have about that. And I also talk about technology, things like using the iPhone and how there's, adaptive features of the iPhone that you can do a number of different things for people who are legally blind, and how to use that. So I try to be as comprehensive as I can on the first visit, knowing that they're going to have a lot of questions. But the last thing I leave them with is I tell them, look, you don't have to remember a lot of this stuff, because the great part about what we do is we all work as a team, and the people who call you will use my name and tell you, what we're going to do for you and how that's going to work, and they'll make an appointment to see you at your convenience. And if you have any questions, you can call me at the number on my large print business card here, and I'll clarify things and check the computer for you, and then come see you again. So I make sure that they know it's sort of a team approach, but I try to make them feel safe in being able to sort of call me and ask any questions, because it's all very overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. So you kind of touch base on all the major points that many of the directors that we've interviewed have talked about for orientation and mobility and registration, assistive technology. You're kind of in a way, you're a generalist in the sense that you're able to touch a little bit about all of those when you're talking to someone. And I'm curious, just for a selfish reason, are the reading services brought up when you meet them? Someone like in Region 5, where we're based, Audible Local Ledger is the reading service for the Cape, the Islands, and the South Coast. And often we can't find the names because of HIPAA laws. We can't figure out who a newly designated blind person is on our own. So we have to rely on family, friends, word of mouth, our school program bubbling up to get some interest who might go, oh, I didn't even know that existed. I think we are part of the original stuff that's given out. But as you said, and this is really important because much of the focus of this MCB community update is to do exactly what you said, to take those folks who are transitioning. And in our world, Region 5, Barnstable County in particular, it's the third oldest county by age in the country, which means you're in a target-rich environment, and not in a good way. You're in a target-rich environment that has a lot of people aging into macular degeneration and retinitis pigmentosa, lots and lots of problems. And the more we talk about what the services are, how the process will work, if this is what's happening as you're transitioning into this new state of sight, it takes some of the fear away from that. And for listeners who didn't know how big that business card was, that business card is like a legal size of paper, 11 by 17 or something. It's a very large piece of paper with large print, very black contrast, as he said, very large, magnified, and on bright white paper. So the three things he was talking about there. So for listeners who couldn't enjoy that holding up of your business card, that's what you missed. So as I was saying, we have spoken with many of the different directors of specific silos of services that MCB gives. And listeners, if you haven't heard those episodes, wherever you're listening to this one, or if you have some vision and you're watching on YouTube, they are available wherever you're listening right now or watching right now. And we get a lot of feedback that they're very helpful and very informative. So you're on a team, you mentioned. Now,
Right.
are you the first person? As we were saying, many are transitioning, many of our listeners, and they have a lot of fear of what comes next. So can you outline that first interaction and how they're introduced? I know you just went through what you would do when you go in. Is that typical that there's a caseworker who's the first person, sets up a call with them after the ophthalmologist has given them the designation? You go in, you sit down. Do you have a pamphlet that you're going through with them and flipping through or talking to them through? Are you, how are you, how are you getting into their house and taking some of that first initial resistance? As you said, you often encounter a little bit of denial or perhaps maybe even anger at life, at what's happening. How do you attack that first meeting? And is it just you? Or are you pointing out, I have a whole team behind me that's going to come in and also give you something that's going to make yours a screen reader, or we're going to give you some technology that will allow you to do better. We're going to train you on your accessibility functions on your PC and your phone. Does it come in as a team, or is it really you and one person having a one-on-one?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Actually, it's a process, and everybody's a little bit different. So I try to meet people where they are, because we service all kinds of folks, even folks that don't speak English or um, have other disabilities in addition to their blindness. Some folks are hearing impaired, so the family is usually a part of it. When I first call up, I will ask for the person directly, but sometimes they will tell me, I'd really like my daughter or my son to be involved. And then I will schedule that as the point person to sort of begin with. But when I meet with people, I try to find out where they are with this. The first thing I'll sort of ask them is, how do you feel about this? Or did you know this was coming? Or how was it explained to you by the eye doctor? How are you doing with this? I'll try to ask some generally open-ended questions to get a sense of, where they are in the process. Um, because some folks, are very well taken care of by their family, and don't, need to sort of be able to cook a meal independently or manage their finances. Other people, that's critical. Some people have family around them, will transport them to appointments, and other people are going to have to find a way to do that independently. There's a lot of people in different situations. One of my most memorable cases was a man who was actually living in a shed next to the house of a friend, and the friend had run a power cord out there, and he had set up his shed. It was literally a tool shed, and the gentleman was living there, and he was legally blind. So we had to help him not only with his blindness, but also with housing, and mobility. And thank goodness he was a very highly motivated person, and we were able to do a lot for him. He actually did find housing and was able to use the CCTV and that sort of stuff. Um, but he's one example. Sometimes I meet people who live in in-law apartments, next to their kids, and there's somebody always available to transport them somewhere or make them a meal or that sort of thing. So a lot of my job is not just a presentation, it's about listening to people and seeing who's available to support them in the environment. And I'll tell you one thing I've learned over 19 years is that, we always push independence as a big thing, and that's a great thing, really it is. But not everybody wants to be as independent as we think they are. Sometimes they really want more help, and sometimes that comes out behaviorally in, we're trying to show them the independence, and they don't want to disappoint us because we're doing so much to help them. But then I find out they're not using some of the things that provided. So I try to break down those barriers right away and say, what is it you really need to do for yourself? Do you want to prepare a meal? Do you want to handle the finances? Do you feel safe about that? Does your family feel safe about that? How are you getting around? Um, you have any? Yeah.
Along those lines, do you also find out if they have any technology background? Like how comfortable are they with a PC or a phone? And are you finding over 19 years? So now you have been there through basically cell phones being adopted very early on, all the way through this transition into social media and the accessibility and everything else. Are you finding a generation aging into comfort with technology that wasn't there when you first started 19 years ago? Are they more proficient with that now?
Some are, and some aren't. It depends. The thing is, Eric, it's technology changes so quickly,
Mm,
and it comes in such varieties. It really is, it's a great benefit to folks, but the training, I think, and the assessment is probably the most important part of that. So I do meet people that have iPads but aren't aware of the visual functions, or, they know how to use it in a limited way, and the children sort of help them, but the children always aren't always good teachers of somebody who's 70 or 80 years old that's trying to use an iPad. So we try to send people in to sort of do some remediary teaching and make sure they can use it properly and are aware of, how it works. But there, like there's a big difference between an Android and an iPhone.
sure. Yeah.
A tablet has different things it can do than a smartphone. So, I was telling you a little bit about my background as a teacher. One of the things that was always important as a teacher for me was repetition. It's not just some people pick things up right away and run with them, and God bless them. But there are other people who need 2 or 3 more lessons, you know, um, and repetition in order to master something. And there's no way to do that except for to have a live person show up and be consistent, and sort of see and ask them to demonstrate what they're doing. So I think the tools are fantastic, and the capabilities are wonderful. But I think the human element is really important in having somebody that can sort of be there, and allow people to make mistakes and to learn and that sort of stuff. Because I mean, I never learned anything from something I already know how to do. It's the making mistakes that makes you learn. So
Right. And what about visual learners? I mean, that people who really prefer to learn visually, obviously you need someone there to do some translating and trying to help them in particular with some of that. For us, we use smart speakers, which I know isn't something that the MCB is currently using, but for us, that's the easiest way for them to hear our broadcast. Our radios are old time radios, and they have dropouts like every kind of old transistor radio might in different places. You're covering the whole Cape Islands and South Coast. That's a lot of radio and a lot of
right.
radio waves that don't get to you. So we have found smart speakers. If you can teach them the skill and the how to do a routine where they're able to get their medical prompts, things like that, that those are some of the ways that we're able to help people with technology. And we have found, even with our readers, the volunteers that come in, I'm finding an average 70-year-old who's coming in, who's retired and wants to read for us as a volunteer, is no longer afraid of recording on a computer or reading a newspaper on a computer. They've actually done that now, and they no longer get their whatever Cape Cod Times delivered to them or whatever it might be. So I was just curious if you're noticing, because we're kind of counting on technology helping us quite a bit in the future as it evolves and becomes more and more helpful. We can see that that's going to be something that as a group that in their 50s were discovering phones, turning 70 now in their 70s when they may be going through these transitions, they're going to at least know the idea of how to use it, and it won't be like a foreign thing that's being kind of opened up in front of them. So I'm glad to hear that. Of course, it depends on every situation. We see that too, but it really is something that we're hoping will evolve into a much larger comfort zone with technology. So on about your specific goals. What do you have in mind for the end of the year? Like, how do you set your goals? Is it case by case by case? Here's what I want to achieve with these different consumers that I'm working with, and on the other hand, those are your goals. What do you want to achieve? And what are the obstacles to getting that done? Do you feel like you have the resources, like you've been given the tools and the resources to achieve what you want to do with your group this year?
Yeah, I mean, the people I work with are wonderful and very dedicated and skilled at what they do. And the communication between us is generally excellent. I wish there were more of us to sort of, to do that on the team. So because the numbers are quite large, I've got about 230 people on my caseload in 18 cities and towns. So it's sometimes a
Wow.
challenge to get to see all of them and follow up on all of them. And make sure all the services are coordinated at different times. But the goal is basically rehabilitation. And what that means is either, community independence or keeping someone from going into a care setting, um, or just being able to, live a more independent and safer quality of life. Um, and to help them move forward. So whether it's, using technology to be able to communicate or, being able to prepare a meal, manage your own finances, I had a lady that I saw out in Pembroke the other day, and we had brought her a large CCTV, a reading machine, and she's like, "I don't want this. It's too big. It's too clunky. I'll never use it." And I said, "Well, can we take a look at it together?" And she said, "Sure." So we put it on her marble countertop, and she put her recipes underneath it, and I showed her how you could change the contrast from white on black, and she was like, "Wow, I never knew we could do this. This is wonderful." And I called her the other day and she said, "This is fantastic. I can't thank you enough. I can read my recipes, I can read my mail, and my husband and I are so grateful I don't have to ask him all the time." But these are things, that you really have to put in place and you have to see people one to one. You can't just send stuff, like you were talking about technology. And I think, technology is a very hard thing because you have to do it well. It's not just, the technology itself, but it has to be thought about. And I'll give you a perfect example of that is the books on tape from the Perkins School for the Blind. That talking book machine used to be, wind up spooled cassettes and that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
But now I explain to people this way. It's sort of like the old Fisher Price toys where it's a hard plastic kind of thing and it's hard to break because often people are intimidated. They think they're going to break something and it'll take
Mhm.
forever to fix. So I tell them, look, it's hard. All the buttons are different colors, they're different shapes, and they all talk. So you could have no vision whatsoever and be able to use that machine just by hitting a button. It'll speak to you and tell you what it does. And I always tell people, don't be afraid of it. The first time you get it, just play with it like you're a little kid. And eventually you're going to learn how to use it and how it works. And you see, the thing that I understand is that it took a long time to develop that, to change that machine. A lot of people had to give their input into, what was working and what wasn't.
Mm.
So that's an excellent piece of technology for me because so many people can use it, whether they have a lot of eyesight, none at all, or anything in between.
And
And
those are the calls we love to get too, right? The
yes,
ones that
yes,
say they're almost a testimonial when you're getting it, and it's just them saying, "Thank you. I didn't know this was there, and now
mhm.
I'm having something better that's made my life this, maybe just this much better. Thank you for doing that." When you get those, you like looking in the mirror in the morning. That's how I feel about it, when we get those calls, changed my life. I had no idea I could get medical prompts and I could hear the news and it. Well, thank you. Thank you. You just made my day. There's nothing better than that. Um,
That's right.
so, are you fully staffed? Right now across the country, we have such low unemployment figures. A lot of companies have trouble hiring. Are you actively looking for people, or are you working with the staff you have and you're at what your head count is supposed to be at this point?
Yeah, I mean, we work under what the state allocates us, like what the state budget is. So that's a lot of, people deciding what money goes where and how much and that sort of thing. And I think that's always going to be the case. There's
Sure.
always politics, related to this and advocacy and, getting people to sort of support the idea that this is a good thing to do. And then, the taxpayers should support it. So, um, I mean, we're not fully staffed, but, we all work the best we can and we all do a good job. And the people that we work with appreciate it. And it's just wonderful to be able to impact somebody's life. Sometimes you have to leave things in, I don't want to get religious, but sometimes you just have to leave things in God's hands.
Sure.
You go out there and sort of say, well, we've provided you this and we showed you how to do this and, we've given you this and, that's a good start and let's see how you do. And sometimes I will get calls back 2 or 3 years later from people that, sometimes I barely remember them because I've got so many. But they'll
Yeah.
say, "Thank you that you did this, but I'm having trouble with this." Or it'll be the kids. My mom can't hear the talking watch anymore. She's lost more hearing. Do you have something else? Or the
Hmm.
magnifier you give is just not strong enough anymore. Can you do something else? And we'll come back and see people. So I've got people I've known from 10 or 15 years ago that'll call me back and say, "Hey, Tony, do you remember me? Thank you for what you did. Can you come out and see us again?" And we'll do that. I think the home visit model is just a wonderful thing
Yeah.
because it gives you so much more information about somebody than you can in an office under bright lights, under perfect circumstances. Sometimes I'll find that, you know, at a nursing home, we gave somebody a large print phone, and they'll call me all the time and say, the phone's not working. And the reason for that is there's a charging cord that comes out of the back of the phone that's supposed to plug into the wall to power the phone, and they've lost that. But the phone has continued to work because there's backup batteries in it. And what has happened is the batteries have died. And it's a 2-minute sort of thing where you kind of go in and say, okay, where's the charging cord? Let's get you another one and plug it in. Happens all the time, but it's constantly re-educating people and being in front of them and seeing where they're at that I think makes the most profound difference. And I mean, boy, I tell you, I wish there were more of us to do this, but we
There's
still
no open recruitment going on right now. You are fully staffed according to budget.
according to budget.
You're not recruiting at college campuses right now or anything that's active for an open position right now. You're at full staff for now.
Well, there are different positions in different regions. I can't really speak for all of them.
Sure.
Technically, we're supposed to have another worker in my unit, but we manage with what we've got according to the budget. So, that's above me. That's sort of the commissioner and anybody else that
Yeah.
advocates for the Commission for the Blind to sort of get more positions or fill them. So,
Well, my last question is something that's on a completely different note, and that's every pun intended. We like to get to know our MCB professionals and what they do in their off time a little bit without getting too nosy. So we ask this question of everybody. What was your first concert, and what is your favorite band or artist?
yeah, I'll tell you, I was thinking about that too. My first concert was Cheap Trick at the Orpheum Theater back in 1978, I think it was. But I wanted to share you something else that was really kind of profound. I lived in Ireland for a year. I lived in Dublin, and I was teaching English in Dublin at the time. And another teacher said to me, "U2 is showing up on at their hotel. Do you want to go see the concert?" And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, they're filming a couple of songs for a British show called Top of the Pops." So I'm like, "Sure." So I went to the River Liffey, which bisects the city of Dublin, and it's kind of a heavily trafficked area. They were performing on the roof of the Clarence Hotel, which U2 owns. So it was absolutely amazing. They were like trucks stopped in the street, people standing on their cars, leaning against the fences. And Bono leaned over the roof of the hotel. You could barely see him because it was really high up, but he waved to the crowd. The place absolutely went mad. It was just it was a tremendous experience. They did "Beautiful Day," I think, and "Elevation" were two of the songs, but it was just a
Wow.
wonderful experience, spontaneous thing.
You had your own little Beatles "Let It Be" moment, right? On the top, on the top of the building, just starting to play, and the crowd goes crazy, and they had to pull the plug.
It was
That's
a lot of fun.
fantastic. Are
Yeah,
they your favorite? Are they one of your favorite artists too?
they definitely are. Yeah,
Tremendous band. Yeah, great band.
yeah.
Well, thank you, Tony, for all the insight that you've provided. This was great. A lot of information, a lot of good stuff. And again, if you're listening at home, think about how much there is to help you if you're facing this particular transition. How much service and support, how many organizations that are out there. You're not alone. We have many people who are reaching out their hands to help. And everything you've said was incredibly insightful. Listeners, join us next month when we interview MCB Vending Facilities Program Director, Lori Karachik. Thanks again, Tony.
Thank you.